of that process, we started an aspect around a pilot where we aim to pool a lot of resources into a pilot project of 5 individuals. But as part of this pilot, we also were trying to explore some of the issues that people were experiencing on the ground in the service sector. And one of the biggest complaints that came out of those interviews was the 55A form. So the 55A form is a South African police services form that is used to report missing persons. And so when somebody goes missing, you'll go to the police station and that is the form that you would fill out. And that form currently is 12 pages long and has not been updated since democracy in South Africa. And there were a lot of issues that kept coming out about that form and how it speaks to when a body is found and how which is the 55B form, which the mortuary fills out, and how it speaks to the information on the 55A form where families report. So we started looking at this 55A form in more depth, me and the W4C team, and there were some really problematic components to that form. For example, under gender, it said male, female, pedophile, and it has very outdated terminology referring to descriptive characteristics of one's body. For example, your hair, your eye, color, texture, skin, even mustache style. And so there was a lot of problems with the form, and the image, there is a body image on the form where people can indicate areas of the human body. And this was clearly a man's body and clearly that of a European man. And so when we started looking into this form, I wanted to see if we could make some changes. I contacted the head of the Western Cape Detectives Agency, and they were very adamant it wouldn't be possible for us to make changes. But through some additional calls, I was able to get a seat at the table with the national head of detectives. And we started talking about the form, and I expressed some of the concerns that I had around the lack of transformation in the form, but also its usability for its purpose. And I offered our expertise to help them update the form. And they were very happy to accept that help. And I just want to jump to the end part first, that the form has been fully updated by our team in conjunction with the South African Police, and it has gone out for comment to the 9 provinces and has been approved. Now we're busy fixing the 55B form to align together. And so I'll talk about some of those streamlined changes, but the reason the new 55A hasn't gone out yet is because they're waiting on the pairing of the 55B, which will also go out for comment in the next 2 months. And we hope both the pair of forms will roll out in 2025. So my colleague, Dr. Catherine Smith, she's a scientific artist at Stellenbosch University, and she redid all of the images for the 55A form. And so she created the images with a gender neutral body shape and also racially neutral body shape. And then we workshopped the form from beginning to end, all of the terminology, a lot of the descriptions. We included binary and non-binary options. We consulted with the LGBTQI community on the correct terminology that would be appropriate. Also adding things on like social media profiles, email addresses. Those obviously weren't around when the form was created originally, but the detectives did point out that a lot of times people are reported missing, but actually aren't missing. They're just not choosing to come home, and they can actually identify that they are still just fine on their social media pages. And so it's a very important component of the form. So we added these components on. The form was reduced to 7 pages, and this is quite important when you think about the trauma of reporting somebody missing and then having to sit with a police officer to fill out a 12-page form. Majority of the time, the form was not complete. And the form is still a paper-based, and at this point in time, the detectives will remain it to be paper-based. However, we are working now, when we finish these two forms, our plan is to work with an engineer at UCT to transform the form into an app, a police restricted app, where the data can be uploaded onto a cell phone in real time, therefore speak to the data from the mortuary in real time, because at the moment you fill out this paper form and it takes anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks for the data to be entered. Now, when you're talking about a missing persons profile and also trying to match to unidentified bodies in the mortuaries, 6 weeks is a significant amount of time when it's considered under law that unidentified persons after 6 to 8 weeks can be buried as paupers. And so this is a really major issue which we are working to address in our follow-up stages. So I would be happy to take any questions you have. Because the new form has not gone yet live to the public, I was a little reticent to share the images and the image changes at this point. Just because I didn't want them to end up in the public media space until the police have had their opportunity to actually roll them out to all of their, to us as society later this year. But I will share them with you as soon as they go live. I'll share them with Viwe and Ashwin Isaacs, who's our TEC representative in our department, so that you can have a look at the updated forms. But I'll take questions. Thanks, Viwe.
No question, but certainly congratulations for getting around what is almost an impenetrable system. So well done to you.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, well then I think Viwe, you maybe
Is there a place for family members? Oh, okay. Sorry.
Sorry, you may go ahead.
No, I wanted to find out if there's a place for family members to upload pictures, saying that you've got of the person who's missing, seeing that you've got an app as well. That sounds like actually like a great idea.
Yeah, so on the paper-based form, it does say a photograph, and they do request a photograph. Obviously, not everyone has a photograph available, either digital or physical, of a missing persons, depending on context. And but with the app, that would again be, the same situation would not be addressed by the app, other than if someone brought in a physical picture, the police officer could take a picture of the picture right on the app, and it would be uploaded instantly.
Yeah. Sounds great, informative. Thanks.
Well done, Vicky. Very important and impactful work. I just wanted to ask more about the coordination of all of this, because this is a national document. How is it received in other provinces?
Yeah, so it's gone out to comment to the 9 provinces. Now within SAPS, that would mean it's gone out to senior staff members within those provinces. I don't know the usability on the ground. We will have to wait until the form is actually officially rolled out in 2025. Our role, to be honest, we helped workshop the form, and being in our sector, we have a lot of access to resources, but a lot of our work was also working administrative, working with the PDF, improving the PDF, making things more streamlined, that dates recorded the same. So I think that it will definitely improve things. However, if a police station in a very remote community has 300 copies of the old form, they're more likely to use those than print new copies of the new form immediately. But in the long run, I think that it will We will be able to assess that better, Ashwin, in the coming year.
I actually also had a question. Let me know if it is a bit premature, but I wanted to ask, do you foresee there being challenges with the form being rolled out across the country in terms of everyone actually understanding why the contents of the new form are important? So having a gender neutral body shown sort of drawn onto the form, and why it's important to not have it be racially specific, etc. So essentially for people to be able to, or for police officers to be able to assist families in completing the form accurately, they need to obviously understand the contents. So will there be an opportunity for capacitation in that sense? Slash, do you foresee there being issues with the form being used in the way that it's intended?
Yeah, those are great questions. I think that one of the aspects that the police did struggle a little bit was the non-binary binary terms. So actually these are clearly defined on the form, because not everybody knows what non-binary is. And so we gave very clear definitions. And so where people wouldn't have been clear, they should be able to be clear through those definitions. The form is no longer going to be available in Afrikaans. It's actually only going to be available in English. And currently it's both English and Afrikaans, but they do to do that moving forward. So the answer to your question is we should have some capacitation, and certainly I will offer my time to do that. However, I always find with these kinds of capacitations that they end up being at a very high level, and the majority of people who actually will use the form will not be at that level. But perhaps we need to create sort of maybe a small package that could be rolled out alongside the form. And actually, that's a really good idea. I hadn't thought of that, where we could explain why it matters. I think to the majority of South Africans, you know, like lots of us in life, we accept new forms and government forms and don't think very much of what's on them, unless they offend us in some way. So the form is certainly less offensive. I found some of the aspects on the form quite offensive, and I'm sure other people would too when they read the current form. So I do think it will be better received, and for people who are aware of these kinds of things, certainly they will notice. I do think that the intentions we have behind the form are well tested by SAPS at the moment, but of course you never know until it actually rolls out. And so then there will be an opportunity for us to revise. But I'm definitely going to take up that idea of creating a capacitation package to distribute with the form.
Great, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Prof, for that presentation. You really are doing such amazing work, and thank you for offering up your time to share that information with us. So now we're going to move on to our next department, which is psychiatry. And we'll have Nicole and Sharon presenting their activities. Thank you so much.
Nicole, would you like to go first?
Sure, no problem. Let me just screen share here. Okay, is everyone able to see the slides now?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Thank you so much to the to Viwe and the Transformation Committee of the faculty for allowing us this opportunity to share some of the transformation work we've done in our division. So I'm from the division of consultation liaison psychiatry, which is a division within the Department of Psychiatry and Mental Health. And why are the slides not moving? Okay, there we go. So within the division of consultation liaison, CL, we have two units. There is the research unit and then the clinical unit. The research unit consists of 8 staff members, which are research officers all the way to research assistants. And then in the clinical unit, there are 7 staff members, and those are comprised of psychiatrists and clinical psychologists and allied health. So the reason why I am describing the structure of the division is that a lot of the divisions within our department are quite similar, that we have a research unit and a clinical unit. For the CL division, before we embarked on active transformation within our division, these two units basically operated in silos. There wasn't much, collaboration or work done between different members of the different units within this division. Another thing I wanted to highlight here is that within these divisions, it's clear that there is a hierarchy within academia or within our division, but also within academia, which is a whole nother webinar. But in our division, with one of our very first meetings where both divisions came together to discuss what we wanted to do as part of our transformation journey, we came to the conclusion that, this hierarchy is not very useful. It's not conducive to transformation or to establishing a sense of belonging within our division, and actually creates divisions within our division. So we wanted to adopt a storytelling method to get to know each other on a more personal level, and to find similarities between us that go beyond the academic setting. But to do this, we needed to kind of break the hierarchy that was evident within our division. And so this is where the pedagogy of discomfort comes in. So this is a workshop that we did within our division. And this workshop challenged us as individuals to rethink, reframe moments of discomfort that we have experienced in the past in our workplace. The main theme of this workshop was to establish the link between discomfort and care. And the facilitator actually posed this question to us, what do we think, what is the link between discomfort and care? I'm not going to share what the members of our division discussed. That is private, and we agreed to the Chapman House rules right at the very start of it. So, and also, I want to encourage people to go and sit with this question themselves. So I'm not going to give the answer in this webinar. But one of the main aims for this workshop was to reframe discomfort. And the fact that we don't address experiences of discomfort, it can result in ethical violence within the workplace, and it's not conducive to overall transformation. But if we are able to work through the discomfort, able to sit with the discomfort, and become comfortable within experiencing discomfort, it can be transformative. Discomfort can also be an aspect of care, and there are different forms of care. So, care between colleagues, care we give to our patients, the care we give to our research participants. And in the process of offering care and being the carer, we also acknowledge that the carer is not exempt from experiencing feelings of discomfort themselves. So this workshop was presented by Dr. Aditi Hamna. She is from the Center for Higher Education at UCT. And she really created a very calming and containing environment, establishing safety rules and basically guiding us through questions that we needed to, really difficult questions that we needed to sit with. Each member of the division was given a chance to share one moment of discomfort that they experienced within the workplace. If they wanted to, it wasn't compulsory for every member to share. If they didn't want to, it was, completely optional if people wanted to share. So we had more than half of the members share, and we actually ran out of time because people were willing to share. I attribute this to the facilitator actually creating such a calming and containing environment. And a lot of the members felt a sense of relief. Having that space, being able to talk about discomfort they've experienced, which they haven't been able to talk about within the workspace before. They felt that the workshop was done in a way that was positive, and that was the aim, sought to build relationships as opposed to highlighting differences between people. All of our members felt a sense of hope and openness leaving the workshop, and a new sense of care for one another. It was a difficult workshop to go through, but it helped us as a division because it gave us a good launch to kind of start our storytelling journey that we wanted to embark on in the CL division. So straight after we had this workshop, the next month, because we had monthly meetings for our CL division. So with the next meeting, we kind of just, got to know each other a little bit more and decided on, storytelling mode that we were kind of going to go into. And then going forward from that, each member of the division at our monthly meetings had an opportunity to share with the rest of the division about themselves, about their journey in academia, their journey in the workplace. And it was very much open-ended. We left it to the individual to decide what they were going to share, how much they were going to share. And so far, it's been really eye-opening. In the sense that, we're colleagues, we're in the same workspace, and we don't really know the individual and personal struggles that each person is experiencing. And so this really, going through this pedagogy of discomfort workshop, obtaining the skill to kind of sit through the feelings of discomfort and not to view it as a negative feeling, to view the discomfort as a process to transformation has really been a game changer in our division, and it really highlights that new sense of caring for one another within the context of experiencing discomfort when it comes to negative experiences in the workplace. And that is about it from me. Thank you, Viwe.
Thank you so much, Nicole. I think we'll move on to Sharon, and then we can have questions at the end of both your presentations.
Sure.
Okay, afternoon everybody. Let me just try and find my presentation. Where is it now? Goodness. Oh, there. Okay, can you all see that? Hi, can
Yes,
you
we
all see
can.
that?
Yes, we can.
I just also need to check, occasionally you faded, Nicole, so I need to check, is it my side or did others also experience that?
I have load shedding at the moment, Sharon, so it could be on my
Okay.
side.
All right, so if I fade, apologies in advance. If it's, I'm sitting at one of the psychiatric hospitals with our very remotely linked EduRoam that's 3 weeks old. I start with that to say that it kind of speaks to our positionality within the mental health field as well as in academia in terms of our focus on intellectual disability. So even there one can see that we are a little bit on the left behind side. But let me start my presentation.
Hello.
Okay. So I'm from the Division of Intellectual Disability, the chair and professor of intellectual disability on UCT side, but I'm part of a team of jointly appointed people. And all of the other divisional members are working in 4 psychiatric hospitals and then jointly appointed to UCT. So you see the 4 hospitals there, and I'm currently sitting in a room at Alexandra Hospital. So I mentioned the constellation of our group because it has impacted on the way in which we work. Each of these individuals and our team as a whole are both the research side and the service development side. So we live and work with that dual role in the department and in our work. So conceptualizing our initiative in terms of the topic of today, I think that I just want to give a little bit of context to where we are working in mental health. In psychiatry, it's a particular focus, and not necessarily, we haven't historically looked at people with intellectual disability in the general society, but we are trying to constellate ourselves more holistically, as opposed to continuing with the institutional idea that people with ID, you know, kind of belong in institutional care settings such as psychiatric hospitals. So the South African Human Rights Commission did some public hearings a few years ago and put out a report which found that within psychiatric facilities, both for people with psychosocial disability or people who are disabled as a result of mental illness, and people with intellectual disability who have a co-occurring mental disorder, have really experienced numerous human rights violations due to numerous factors, but including the fact that the value of people with ID and psychosocial disabilities has historically been much lower than your average citizen. There is a new mental health policy for the country, and in line with a rights-based approach, which is in our Mental Health Care Act, it does speak to people with psychosocial and intellectual disability, the rights to equality, non-discrimination, as well as participation in planning of mental health services. And we in our division would say beyond mental health care services, you know, participating in policy and other activities that all citizens have a right to do, and to be supported to organize themselves in settings where they can be of mutual help to each other in that citizen role. So I've just included this quote here, again, to emphasize my point that we tend to think of people with ID in a an enclosed environment, and that does stem from society's misperceptions or discrimination of these individuals. And this is a quotation from a study that I conducted a few years ago, where my respondent said, there's a hierarchy within disability. At the top, you get the people with physical disability. Next, you get those with psychosocial disability. And right at the bottom of the rung, you get people with intellectual disability. So I thought this really speaks the truth about the situation. So why do I raise all of these things? Because, of course, inherent in what I've just said is an enormous amount of across the range violence and towards people with intellectual disability, whether it's microaggressions or overt harm and hurt. And evidence does show that people with intellectual disability tend to suffer higher rates of physical, mental, and emotional abuse, and the trauma that's associated with that. And that sometimes we think that the difficulties we see them presenting with are results of the intellectual disability, but it might well also be due to, expression of traumatic events in their lives across the lifespan. So how have we tried to incorporate addressing this issue in our work in the division? Firstly, as I said, we're a team of joint appointees, and we thought we need, as clinicians, to start by embracing the research side and try to bring some organization to our thinking about the issue of participation, because we do feel that in whatever work we do, that the only way to break these barriers of exclusion is to find ways to include people with intellectual disability to represent themselves in society as a way to break down these abusive barriers and exclusionary practices that we have. So this, for example, is a study by Babawa Tibashe-Pume, who just graduated on Friday with her PhD. And she sought to look at spelling out for us a framework for assisting people with intellectual disability to self-advocate and also to guide us as a division and other role players to look at the complexity of trying to get people to participate. If you look at here, she's got three different aspects to her conceptual model. On the left-hand side, looking at very necessary needs of personal development in self-advocacy for people to participate. Neurotypical people like ourselves take it for granted that, capacity development, learning, and to inform our participation in society is our right, but we don't see necessarily that similarly adapted forms of getting that right for people with ID and other disabilities is also necessary. And then in the middle, you can see how society needs to come to the table to work collaboratively with people with intellectual disability. And here we want to draw on the African wisdom of Ubuntu, connectivity, social inclusion, and interdependence. So I think we tend to have a very independent focus, but all human beings really only function interdependently. And it might be more obvious in people with intellectual disability, but it's basically a human condition. So the kinds of supports that people with intellectual disability need are visible but human, and we want to actually not see that as pathology, but as something that needs to just get extra attention when it comes to people with ID. And then lastly, we're really trying to, in our work with people with intellectual disability, try to get their opinions into policies and practices. So how did we actually do that? So some of the things that we did last year, which went into our transformation report, relate to trying to get people to think about this issue as a as a forefronted issues. So Ockett Coetzee and Charlotte Capri, two of our team members, wrote this position statement on harsh caregiving, allegations of abuse and neglect at one of our psychiatric hospitals, as a discussion document to just get us thinking about those issues rather than avoiding addressing the issues. So we use this position statement both to alert management within the health department of our concerns. I think we all know about the Esidimeni tragedy of a few years ago, where people with psychosocial disability and intellectual disability, 144 of them died due to poor health department practices, and we would like to avoid that kind of situation in the care and service situations, the institutions that we work in. We also use this to work through ourselves as a division, what are some of our responses are going to be, and we used this also in a meeting that we have in our department called an OMM, or On Our Mind, where we discuss the same issue with colleagues, remembering that psychiatric facilities as a whole are not necessarily the kind of friendly spaces that people are happy to go to. And so this is an issue one should address across the board. And then a second thing that we did, that we do regularly also last year, is to have advocacy related conferences and seminars. And if you look at the content of this program that we had last year, you will see it ranges from needing to make legislative and policy changes which are prejudicial towards people with ID, changes in service development, trying to get people safe and sound, and addressing subgroups within the intellectual disability population. Here we see Sandiswa's study on deaf people who are intellectually disabled, and then Sibisishi's study, who really went out of the way to try and use research methodology that was appropriate for inclusion, rather than to say that you can't include people with intellectual disability in everything you do. Then we also have practitioner updates for service providers within the NGOs and healthcare centers, looking at trying to change attitudes there, as well as giving information that assists them to treat people with ID, appropriately. This was also a presentation by Ockett, one of many. And then we also do keep an eye on legislation that's coming out, and at every opportunity try to put forward some redress, because you'll be shocked to see how many pieces of legislation actually still contain quite an archaic and abusive terminology and restrictions on people with ID. So this was a submission we did late last year in collaboration with the Western Cape Forum for Intellectual Disability, myself, and Tony Abrams, one of the psychologists at Lenta here, assisted them with the submission. And we try to do that regularly. Then I showed you Babawa's conceptual framework, but of course, if we are going to be involving people with intellectual disability, then we have to use appropriate methods. And this is an example of how we've tried to translate her complex word-heavy conceptual framework into an easy-to-read format that can be used in workshops with people with intellectual disability to bring across these ideas and to get their ideas on how we may do things better to assist them. Then, so those are some of the examples that we've tried to use. And this is ongoing work in the, as a thread through everything we do. So hope is the essential ingredient to inform recovery. So we want to inspire people with hope, people with ID and non-ID, around this issue of inclusion. We want to keep up the pressure, both through our own advocacy and trying to improve the opportunities for people to self-advocate directly. And then capacity building for researchers and practitioners to be inclusive, as well as for people with ID to be able to participate. but keeping in mind that this work is for service delivery improvement, because that's the main part of our work. We also need to do training of staff, because some of the abuse we experience in our centers is due to trauma people experience by, vicarious witnessing of difficult situations, compassion fatigue, and moral injury and burnout. So yes, we need to also take care of the caregivers. And then lastly, just having closer collaboration with NGOs so that we can get out there to broader communities. And just as an example of that, I'd like to show a short video, which is a production that is featuring people with intellectual disability who agreed to be part of this. And we see it as a visual policy brief from our research, which brings about the opportunity for self-representation by people with ID. Vera, I don't know if you can show it, but let me see if I can stop presenting. Is there still time for me to show this video or not? Vera?
There is still time. Sorry, I was just setting it up for you. If you stop sharing, then I can play it.
Okay. All right, that's brilliant. Let's miss that. Stop sharing. So I haven't stopped sharing. I can't see on my side.
No, it's fine. Can you see it?
I can, yes. So
okay. Okay, I'm going to stop playing it. Just let me know if you can't hear the sound.
Okay. Perfect.
What is self-advocacy?
I've had to stand up for people on the street. I saw someone. At first, I didn't know if I should go for it or if I should try and break this up because they were two bigger men, bigger than I was. But my conscience told me, you have to do this. So I did. And I'm thankful I did because I could have saved that guy's life.
Some people like disability, like me, struggle to read. I can stand up for myself. And I'm not shy to speak. I'm a person who like to talk.
I'm very bad at that, but I try to do it. So yeah, I need to learn on that. But I mean, like my friends always tell me, like, you need to stand up for yourself. And like, I try, but it's hard. But I mean, I can do it, but sometimes there's some things that are just harder than others to stand up for yourself for.
I can speak kindly for myself, stand up for yourself. I don't need other people make choices for me, I'm making my own choices alone.
Stigma and discrimination are ongoing challenges for young people with intellectual disability, which makes it difficult to find opportunities or spaces for them to speak up for themselves.
Children kept on bullying me, where I actually got to the point where I wanted to commit suicide.
So kind of struggle me too. I take it every day, because secret people like to touch on a person.
Yes, I was at learning challenge school, but still the same people would still do the same thing. They would judge you before you knowing somebody, which for me that's just silly. Like why do we have to judge people before we know them? Like I've been called lots of things. Like I can't mention them, it's not publicly acceptable, but like
Only the reason is I don't really worry so much about friends because that they were using me.
What do they do when they think you're fun?
Tease and play so jokes like in a serious way.
They treat you unfair, man. Like they tell you you're not special, you're just you're not even part of the country. Like you know what I mean?
Young people with intellectual disability want to be treated the same as everybody else.
Well, I'm just a normal guy. I love watching sport. I love being from Africa. It's where I belong. It's where I will always be from.
Back in my school years, I had done a lot of stuff in school. I was mostly in soccer, woodwork, and office admin. A year after going through different therapies and things, I decided to actually quit and go out in the big world and go and work. Because that's where I found my passion, was working. And I found out being in a work environment is actually my type of field.
Basically, my experience of having a learning challenges, basically everywhere I went, I get laughed at because people didn't understand that we are just normal people. We're just people that just want to be ourselves. We don't want to be laughed at. We don't want to. We're basically like everybody else, but for some reason, to some people, I'm not living at all people, but to some people, it's a huge, big issue.
Altijd I can tell people with respect, how you do that thing. Like I'm judge on. I'm just going on with life.
We should be all treated the same. And people mustn't judge us and you treat us because our brains is just different.
Well, people just respected everyone for who they were, and if people just gave other people a chance to speak, not to like get all angry because someone's different to you.
Guys, we are all the same, no matter what. We all God's children. Yeah, thanks.
Don't treat them any differently to like yourselves. They're just like you. They just have different like challenges, and they shouldn't be treating them differently. Yeah. I just want to put it out there, people mustn't treat other people differently compared to what they have in life. We're all the same. Just remember that we all love each other.
Given the chance to speak up, these young adults want to express their opinions on the supports that they need.
Yeah, lots of times not everywhere I go now, but when I was younger, everywhere I go, even you go to the, say for instance, to the doctor, and he would rather ask your parents questions than ask you questions. So yes, I may not be very good with words, but I can talk for myself myself. And it just infuriates me when people want to talk for you, and then you can never talk about what you may think something different if you say at the doctor, and then the doctor asks your mom a question, and then you can't say what you wanted to. So
yeah, and do you believe that there's a lot of things you can do?
Yes.
And do you think you always get the opportunity to do it?
Not really.
I started getting into dancing, and dancing took me to a whole new level. I started meeting people that had the same disability as me, and that's how I started making friends and starting standing up for people that have disabilities.
just let people speak before you. Let people tell you their side of the story. Don't like let someone make up some funny story about someone. And if you don't know someone, let them talk to you first. Don't just believe what you want to believe. Like, it's just not what life should be.
Young people with intellectual disability have the same needs as everyone else.
Well, there was a time now where I was at school, primary school, right? and they did a screen test on me, and they found out that I had dyslexia at the age of 7. And what the primary school did was, instead of actually finding me the help, they actually ended up just pushing me over and over and over. And that ended up leaving me dropping out of school. It left me actually going out into the big world, going looking for a job. And up to today, I have no job. I couldn't apply to any normal high schools. I couldn't do certain things like read a book properly. I couldn't go and spell properly, things like that. I picked up very slowly, and it just made me feel very uncomfortable than the others, because all the other people was progressing and I was the one who was standing back.
I couldn't be in a big class in school, so my mom said no. The school said I must rather go to a special needs school.
If you could change one thing for people with learning challenges, what would it be?
Education.
In what way?
The way the teachers treat the people with disabilities, man. Like, how can you force the student to know all the work when you're not even giving him the specific time and stuff?
What brought me to living, to learn new things, to learn about life, work, how to live life. Yeah.
Kind of. I'm learn new things and make new friends out.
It is important to include young people with intellectual disability in actions which influence their lives. Families and other supporters should include young people with intellectual disability in all areas of their lives, including civic and political activities. Service providers and policymakers should also consider reasonable accommodation to include the voices of people with intellectual disability in the development of policies and services that meet their needs.
The government should rather take our side with people with disability. They must just help us. People mustn't take so much advantage with all people with learning challenges.
They mustn't be scared to speak up for themselves, and if they need something to say, I'm there for them.
Anything else you want to say, Eric?
Just be kind, be you. Don't allow people to take you for a fool. We live in a beautiful world. Let's try and help people. Let's try and be the best version of ourselves. Don't let anybody put you down, and don't let anybody try and destroy who you are.
Thank you. That was an output from Nicole Goldberg's recent doctoral study. Thanks so much for giving us the time.
Thank you so much, Sharon, and thank you so much to Nicole. You both are really doing such amazing work in your divisions and in your department. So I'll open up for questions, and then once we're done with questions for psychiatry, we'll move on to pathology's written presentation. Yes, Natasha?
Thanks, Biwa. Wow, thanks. Those were pretty phenomenal presentations. I mean, really, wow, that was amazing to hear that work. Thank you. So my question is for Nicole, actually. It's not, I mean, it's not so much a question, but I'm just curious about, you know, whether your department has had an opportunity to kind of engage with this idea that I'm thinking about. And it relates to what you were talking about, so sort of the impetus for the work you were doing around flattening power structures and kind of flattening hierarchies. And so, I mean, I've thought about this a little bit as well. And I guess the point at which I feel like moving in that direction comes unstuck is when it comes down to things like responsibility and accountability. And I think those have become really, really important concepts in, you know, kind of ensuring that people are sort of living and acting, you know, according to the values that we say we hold ourselves to. And I'm just wondering about how, or if you thought about that in relation to, you know, how a department or a unit functions, because I've not found a way to kind of think through that. And I'm just curious if you guys have, yeah, given that thought.
Thanks, Natasha. I think that's a very difficult question because, yes, there is the very practical side of things. Like you mentioned, you know, roles and responsibilities, etc. And then obviously, as you go up the hierarchy, the level of responsibility, etc., changes. I don't know if there are discussions around this happening in our department in a broader sense. Maybe Irisha can help with that. She's the chair of our transformation committee. I think I did see her here. Yes. I'm not sure if Irisha wants to say anything, or, you know, if there is other work in other divisions within our department. This is not something that we explicitly discussed within our division of CL. I'm just thinking around, you know, we are in the space
No, put it on. Put it on now.
with that.
Apologies.
No worries. But I'm just thinking around in the context in which I work, right? I started out as a research assistant, very much aware of the hierarchy, very much aware of my position, not only in the division, in my research unit, but also in the department. And that has changed over the years. But now, in my function as a research officer, I am even more aware of that. And when I am, you know, interacting with my colleagues, interacting with the research team and the research assistants that I am responsible for, I am aware of that there is an unspoken power imbalance. And I think if we just have more awareness around that, it will go a long way to at least start to flatten those kinds of power imbalances and hierarchies. I think that different roles and responsibilities will always be there, but that doesn't need to function within a system where the power imbalance is so negatively experienced, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, and thank you for sharing that. And I think that, I think sort of rethinking how we think about what power is and how we hold it and share it is probably kind of a fruitful space to be in. So yeah, thank you for sharing those ideas. Thanks. think you should just go ahead, Xander.
I'm like, okay. So I think mine is more, it's not so much, well, it kind of is a question, but what I've noticed is that in many spaces when we have these, Nicole, I'm talking about Nicole, when we have sessions where we really, unburden and expose our vulnerabilities, and we feel like we build bridges. And as you said, when you leave that space, everyone felt reasonably, good. But as the application later down the line, how did you, I find that people can't think about power dynamics on a daily basis. They can only think about it when they're sitting in a room, I guess. So how have you managed to carry that through into daily life, I guess is my question.
Yeah, thanks, Zinda. It's not easy. It's daily work, and I think it's not something that you can enforce as a divisional rule. It's really something that comes from the individual, and that's all that I can do in my personal capacity. I can't speak for the head of division. She's not here, but we try to cultivate it by making sure that we meet regularly, that we give equal opportunity to everyone to speak, because often in the in whatever sessions, meetings, teas, whatever spaces we are in, we kind of feel that people in the lesser power positions don't speak as much. And so it's just about being aware of that, making sure that they have the opportunity to speak when they want to speak. But I really think that it's an individual mind shift that needs to happen. I'm actually open to ideas from everyone here. If anyone has ideas on how they think something like this can be implemented on a much larger scale, that it becomes the fabric of like your everyday work. I see Sharon also has a hand.
Yeah, just to add to what you're saying, Nicole, I mean, it's now 10 years that we are doing this in the department. And I think that divisions like yourself and a few other divisions are at a divisional level really trying to drill down. But at the same time, we have departmental moments of connection through the OMMs we have, through other meetings, through conversations now, including people talking about these issues. So a slow build up of a culture of transformation through, the relational space that we had with people in the department. I think it's a time-taking process.
Yeah, I agree with you there, Sharon. It's definitely it's something that takes time. And like you said, there are those moments of connection, and I think that helps us to build onto the next moment.
Thanks very much. And Sharon, maybe I can ask you also a question. I was wondering in terms of, with employment equity and intellectual disability, is that something that's part of what's considered disability from a university policy point of view? Because obviously it requires people to volunteer the information, and with the stigma attached, I'm just wondering, it seems easier if you have a physical disability, let's put it that way, in terms of just admitting something. Maybe not admitting, it's just you can't actually not admit it. So in terms of employment equity at UCT, do you know whether that is actually actively considered?
So at our university, not, but internationally, there are courses, university-based and college-based courses for people with intellectual disability, keeping in mind that generally we wouldn't think that someone who has a diagnosable intellectual disability would be able to enter a university course. But there are adaptations that can be made to make that kind of course available, and that is happening internationally. When it comes to specific learning disorders, though, where someone may be neurotypically developed but have a specific learning disability, I think that that is definitely something we should be looking at, which people may not wish to divulge, where supportive environment can definitely assist them with their education. And I think at primary and high schools they talk about accommodations, and these can actually go through to adulthood. But I don't know how many people would be willing to come into university education and say, I need those accommodations to continue. If that answers your question, Zendo.
Yes, thanks, Sharon. It's nice to hear your voice, by the way.
Yours too. While people are thinking, just to also add that, in some instances we've had departments, and I think the Department of Social Development has been quite good at this. We're hoping to learn from them and international best practice, to include people with disabilities as lecturers. Although they may not be formally qualified, they come with lived experience that can expose students from different faculties to perhaps their very first encounter with someone who has a mental disability or an intellectual disability or another disability, and to be learning from that person's lived experience as practitioners of the future.
Maybe to fill in the silence, I can't stand silence. Today I had this interaction with the students, so I convene a course for MBCHB Year 1 students. And the student was really upset about how other students treat lecturers or facilitators in a particular session that they have. And the tutor or facilitator had, instead of using the word locate, had used the word allocate. And this individual laughed and made everybody else feel incredibly uncomfortable and just wouldn't stop making fun of what the facilitator had said. And I mean, that was such a small thing, and these are our future healthcare professionals, I feel quite devastated that we still have 18-year-olds. So I can imagine what they would do if we had intellectually disabled individuals in their classroom. It's actually quite scary to think about it, or even in the vicinity, the harm that they could do. Anyway, that's just my thought for the day.
Thanks, Indy. If I can just comment on that, I really think that this needs to solve something like that. It really needs to start way in the beginning. Like children at school, when they enter school, should be receiving active lessons and instruction in empathy. because I truly feel that that comes from a lack of empathy and understanding. And if it is really concerning that these are our future medical practitioners that is behaving in this way, it's I mean, that's really sad to hear. But I think if we had something like that in our education system, it could solve so many ills, happening at school, out of school, etc., and just having more inclusion of people who are different than we are. And I can give you the facilitator's number for the pedagogy of discomfort, so you can sit in the discomfort of silence, Cinder.
I know. I don't know what's wrong with me, eh? I just can't always filling in silences and then saying the most inappropriate things too. Okay, I'm going to keep quiet.
Hi, Irisha can't unmute herself, but she's on my phone. So here she is going to make a comment. Go for it, Irisha.
Hi, everyone. I'm so sorry. I can't unmute myself. I've been rendered voiceless, and it's very frustrating. But I actually just wanted to comment on the earlier discussion around the kind of the really culture change that's required in this kind of in transformation. And just wanted to reiterate the fact, something that Sharon mentioned, that we've really been working at this for more than a decade, and some of the gains that we've made recently is actually, I think, related to that. So I do think that it's important to have these kinds of opportunities to be able to talk and to share, but it has to be, it has to be followed up with sustained work around trying to think about how some of those structural changes can happen. And so, yeah, I just think that that's a very unspoken part of the work that we do, and that a lot of that is also very difficult and thankless sometimes, and needs a lot of support. And I know that this is something that we've been talking about in the Transformation Committee. But certainly in our department, the kind of key issues around creating spaces where we can talk about difficult things has been part of that, and then part of that is also to be able to kind of look at to continue to filling the agenda of what is required to sustain those conversations. So I just wanted to add that to the conversation of early on.
I'll keep you on the phone, Irisha, so you can join the meeting, because nobody should be voiceless. We've agreed today.
Maybe I can just jump in. I was just thinking, just building on this discussion about power and structure and the UCT space in particular, and because this is Transferrable Successes Forum, I think that the example, and I'm not trying to punt my own department, but I think the example that DHSE shared, and I think it was in the February forum, around the way we shifted or rethought our committee structures. Or no, maybe not the structures themselves, but who was included in those committee structures and in what ways, in order to ensure that not only were past staff properly included in all committee structures, because those are the decision-making spaces and the spaces that people, through which we make our voices heard. And because of the hierarchy of committee structures, those voices eventually can reach the very top. So it doesn't flatten the hierarchy, but it does disrupt the power in ensuring that we're including different voices, more voices, voices that are often excluded from those spaces in those spaces. And, you know, finding a way to ensure that it's not just about including people in those spaces, but also recognizing their contribution to the space in a way that is equivalent to academics being recognized for their committee work. So we found a way to make that work in our department. And, you know, I think people might find that interesting to think about some of those strategies and how they could work in other spaces, you know? Yeah, so I just wanted to transfer some ideas.
Hi, Natasha. Okay, okay, you can still hear me. I just wanted to say that thank you for that. We've done a similar exercise in our department, and we now have a past staff member and self-funded member on our EXCO for our departments. And we've similarly wanted to encourage all divisions to look at how they include those specific categories of staff within the hierarchies, if you want to call it that.
And we also have a dedicated past staff forum with, you know, our most senior past staff person as the chair of that forum, which is really very helpful to, and she's also on EXCO. I think that's also very helpful to just get people into the mainframe of the departmental structures.
Yeah.
I think Viwa is having audio issues or something like that because they've got load shedding. I'm not sure if there was meant to be another presentation. I'm not trying to take over, but I don't want Zenda to freak out in the silence.
I think Viwa posted a message to say she's not able at this time to share the written input.
Okay.
And then, so Viwa, perhaps you can indicate in the chat if you want to close the meeting. Let us know. Thank you.
Maybe I can also just say something, not because it's silent. I'm just thinking about something. There was a past forum. When was it? Not a past forum. What am I talking about? The dean met was supposed to meet with all the past members of faculty to discuss the faculty strategic plan. And then one of the comments that came up was the, you know, the hierarchy and how difficult it is to actually participate in this whole structure. And I think what the Lionel was trying to do was trying to incorporate PASS in terms of getting information for the strategy. But what came across for me a little bit was, and oh yeah, so one of the things that came out was that in terms of committees, we don't actually have any PASS staff on a number of our faculty committees. But the question that was raised was, what committees should they sit on, which would directly sort of relate to what PASS members are sort of directly involved in, I guess. And I thought that was an interesting comment because that came from, I think it came from Lionel. And how do you, I mean, and I didn't have a response because I wasn't sure, should PASS members be on all committees or just relevant ones? I guess that would be my question. And who determines what's relevant? And when afterwards, when we had this discussion, we thought we needed some sort of faculty PASS forum. And a lot of departments and divisions don't even know what form that could take. So I was just wondering, I mean, Natasha, I see your hand is up, maybe from the Transformation Committee's side. and the subcommittee on staff development, whether that's sort of been discussed or formulated, because it didn't come out there at the forum. And I was just wondering.
Yeah, so I mean, that is the need to have a faculty pass forum is something that we've raised with the deanery. But I feel like there's a little bit of misunderstanding about what we mean by that, because we get the message back, but yes, there have been past forums, and I think they're being thought of as discrete events, opportunities for a past forum, rather than actually part of the structure of how we work. And I mean, in relation to your question around, which committees would past need to sit on, I mean, I think we have to ask the question, well, what areas do past work in? I can't think of a single area at this university that does not have past staff working in it. And so from that perspective, I think that every committee should include members of past, because this university, if past staff weren't here, this university would shut down. We cannot run this university without them. They are in the majority, and yet they sit on very few committees. And when they do sit on committees, it's almost always in some sort of servicing officer role. And that's not then actually on the committee as a voting member, as someone who has a right to speak and who has a perspective that's very different from the academic perspective. They see other things, other issues that need to be dealt with, and so, sorry, I feel quite strongly about this issue, so I'm getting a little bit worked up here. But yeah, so I mean, this is really something that we've worked hard towards in our department, and something that we sort of are continuing to advocate for, because I also think that this is something that we can raise from the ground up. If we have a critical mass of departments who have recognized this need and who have established departmental past forums, and who are now including past staff on their executive committees, as I think is right, we can build this from the ground up. We are then in a position to say, but we now have a series of 8 or 10 departmental past forums, each of those being chaired by individuals who can now start to collectively meet and build a faculty level past forum that way. So I feel like we don't always need to wait for the top down kind of approach. Yeah, so those are just some of my thoughts. But yeah, it's part of the conversation. We've circled back to it several times and haven't gained enough traction yet. But I think I'm hopeful that a ground up approach is a fruitful pathway, and it sounds like a lot more departments are starting to incorporate this into the structure. And so I think that makes me hopeful for how we move forward.
Did everybody see Viwe's second message saying that we can close when we concluded? Not sure how we're going to decide that, Viwe, without your chairing.
Yeah, I'll promise not to say anything else. I'm done.
Can I then propose that we close?
Yes, I'm happy with that. I think everyone's
talked out. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, I'll go ahead then and say thanks to all of the presenters again on behalf of Viwe. She's saying it in the chat now, but thank you to all of you for presenting and for stimulating such a nice discussion. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Goodbye.
Cheers, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.